Welcome to another episode of Consensus on Reality, a podcast.
And more.
And more. So true. If you like what we do, this is a Patreon. I mean, this is a it's a good start. This is a public episode, I think. If you enjoy our public episodes, check out patreon.com/consensusunreality for just $5 a month, which is the price of a donut, I think. You can access our full episode archive, our regular exclusive episodes, which come more often than our public episodes. You get exclusive written material, accessing our Discord server, and if you join our print club tier, you will get our quarterly Journal of Shells, which is a very cool printed publication that we do that includes some writings from us, some archival material, and some other written and artistic materials that we source from other creators. That tier also includes some other exclusive printed and recorded items that come in the mail. So check that out at patreon.com/consensusunreality. It's the best way to support what we do. We're not really about being influencers or YouTube content creator types. We mostly do our business over at Patreon. So check that out if you enjoy this type of content. This is kind of a funny episode to jump into. I think some listeners might be familiar with this content in one way or another, whether it's the Law of One raw material, or maybe the connections to Andrija Puharich that may have been heard on this show and on other parapolitical and
many other podcasts.
Yeah, paranormal podcasts. Andrija Puharich is kind of like the mad scientist boogeyman of MK Ultra type channeling conspiracy lore.
I don't think he deserves it.
Oh, you're really jumping the shark there, but
I like him.
I'll accept it.
We don't even have to talk about him on this episode. He's going to come in later, I feel like.
Right.
Don't you think?
Absolutely, I do. But I'm just saying that why people may have heard of this before. You just like jump to the end of the third episode of a series, be like, I
have to defend him. I like him. I think he's cool.
Yeah, we'll get there, buddy. Slow down.
We're there. I can't have somebody insulting a
typing sound. Nice.
Shoot. A Croatian American immigrant.
Good. I love that. That's what you were just looking up. That's awesome, man. We got a crack team on it, obviously. It's cool though because I like the way that we fell into this episode. I think Don Elkins and Carla Rueckert's body of work is an extremely strange corner of contactee channeled ufology, and even apart from the connection to Puharich, which I think is will be a point that a lot of people would focus on. It's quite strange. Yeah, it's a big point for sure, but it's also like their whole thing and their small nucleus that they created is really interesting and weird, and
for sure.
I think kind of speaks to a certain time in history as well, which maybe we'll get to the good and the bad of the situation. But it's cool too, thinking about it, because we were planning on doing an episode really about the new Disclosure documentary, and of course did the classic overlook, thinking that it would be available to stream like any normal documentary after release. But these UFO things always get they try so hard to churn up the hype in whatever online publications are left, that it takes like a month for it to appear for rent on any streaming service.
Yeah, I thought this was a Greer one. I thought, but then their titles are so similar. It's like the Battle for Disclosure and the Age of Disclosure.
Yeah.
And so I watched the Battle for Disclosure, and I was like, it was from 2024. I was like, this is just the same Stephen Greer routine. Why were you interested in this? I don't care. But then I saw, oh, the Age of Disclosure was premiering at South by Southwest, and it's a Lou joint. It's a Lou Elizondo, what do you call it? Like his stamp of approval.
Oh, it's like
And
it's like a bunch of those
it's
jokers.
all the guys but Stephen Greer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think Lou is kind of like the magnetic center of that of that axis. And
You got
who's the director? It's somebody who has done a couple other of these big UFO documentaries, I think.
I don't know. I listened to an interview with him, and I've heard rumblings of this documentary from people who are
Yeah,
tangentially interested in the UFO UAP thing.
it proves it. It
It,
proves the UFOs are real.
proof. I mean, it's got like the skinwalkers at the Pentagon crowd and the Soul
Right.
Foundation people. I wonder if Nolan is interviewed in there. Yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of the Elkins, Carla Rueckert, and the Puharich 9 stuff as well. The focal point really is, preparing society for this quote unquote mass landing, right? Like a lot of that work, and a lot
The
of
nine stuff for sure.
the 9 stuff, and I think it's
The
also in
later.
the Law of One stuff as well, like a raising of human consciousness to prepare us to integrate with some higher
One.
dimensional intelligence.
Yeah, or trying to like lay out a groundwork for how one could do that, or how one can realize the unified nature of everything, being a emanation of creation and the creator. And they kind of have this very meticulous, sort of post-Scientological, I would call it, like approach to myth making and creating sort of like a religious hierarchy, not hierarchy exactly, but a system, that is sort of followable in the way that a lot of these sort of space age religions did. And it's honestly kind of fascinating that the Law of One and LL research, or Love and Light, or is it Light and Love? That LL research is like still kicking. Like they still have a website. I was just looking at their retreats for the year,
Hmm.
thinking like, huh, maybe I should just give it all up and go do that. Um, but in the same way that, any of these other surviving like space age alternative religions are still around, I don't know, it all started in these really bizarre circumstances. Like this one in particular with Don Elkins and Carla Rueckert, and then Jim McCarty, who's the only one still kicking, and who I guess we both listened to the audiobook of Secrets of the UFO. Weird S placement in that. Secrets of the UFO by Don Elkins and Carla Rueckert, and that the audiobook's narrated by Jim, who's kind of the third in the triad. And yeah, so it kind of started with this weird little trio of people, and maybe that's a good place to start. Is why they're,
Yeah, yeah,
out there, like what they did.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of the cool and interesting part about it. And we've been kind of stuck in the UFO corner of this podcast for the better part of this year, or at least this winter into this spring.
Yeah.
Been talking about a lot of things like The Fourth Mind by Whitley Strieber and the new Lavenda DeLong book, and revisiting some older stuff like Trevor James Constable and Gray Barker at Giant Rock. So this is kind of like pulling on this thread again, and really like backtracking as to how these things get built out, because I feel like the Galactic Federation stuff really starts to emanate from the Law of One material, it's being built out in this Secrets of the UFO book by Don
Yeah.
Elkins, and it certainly gets expanded and built out in uh, the channeling of the nine, which you have
The Ashtar command too.
the
And there's like a
Ashtar commands
yeah.
of what's his name, the giant rock
Hold
dude.
on. Oh, Van Tassel.
Yeah, George Van Tassel.
And then all the post, like it kind of took on a life of its own. There's like a couple like competing channeling things. Now it's like it's everywhere. But for a while, yeah, there was like Ashtar, the Nine. They're all like interbreeding too. I guess that's a bad choice of word, but um, they're kind of mixed together. Like they're all kind of a similar cast of characters.
Well, it all becomes synergistic, and I think that's what's crazy is
Yeah,
like when you kind of root out how some of this stuff started. Don Elkins was a college professor, and I guess like we're gonna have to like make some assumptions on the story because the story is kind of interpersonally quite weird. So
it's very much like a dramatic tale. Like it's like a tragedy, really.
tragedy, yeah, for sure, and it's a strange interpersonal relationship, and the whole thing's kind of strange from an outside perspective, and I think we like to take all of that with a grain of salt, certainly. But I would assume that he seemed like one of those college professors that was very close with his students, maybe in, in a way, I don't know, that some people would maybe draw a long eye at or something, but
Maybe. Yeah, I don't I mean, because he was doing these this is an interesting thing, not to like put the cart before the horse, but often like the law of one stuff and the raw stuff and Elkins and Rueckert and all of that are criticized as being like kind of a creation of Puharich, but um, in reality, he was already doing these sorts of really interesting meditation contact experiments with his students as just sort of like a what would you call it, like an amateur UFO investigator,
well,
where he
he
would
was
try to have them have these contact experiences through not was it hypnosis or just meditation, but
meditation, and I think he started to integrate. Like this is where we kind of like it's funny to do an episode like this is we're researching it, because I want to
right.
see if hypnosis starts to get integrated after he meets Puharich, because that is something that people have alleged. Clearly, there was this experimentation going on that Don Elkins was doing with his college students. He was a physics professor,
Yeah.
but he was trying to induce the contactee experience through meditation. So basically,
Mm.
trying to like generate contact. That's the
Yeah, right.
intention. Instead of being a contactee of chance, he was trying to create a protocols to generate contact, which is sort of where we're at now with CE5, and this controversial experiment was done on Hellier as well, which stirred up some stuff
Right.
online.
It's interesting because I think it's very advanced for its time, whereas I mean, or maybe not, but to us now it seems like it is because it was thinking of this as not a literal space contact, and he wasn't like he was already thinking of it as something that is just as much about the internal landscape of a mind and a soul as it is about using some sort of signaling technology to get a radio message out into the world or something. And so, yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. And he seemed like a really kind of, I don't know, yeah, ahead of his time in a certain way. And it's not surprising he crossed paths with that other trailblazer of Puharich. And so the Secrets of the UFO book is really interesting because it starts out as sort of like a almost John Keel-esque kind of state of the UFO with some references to particular cases that he found interesting. Sort of trying to position the UFO field as worthy of serious consideration. And by the end of it, of course, he's read Puharich's Uri, a journal of whatever. What's it called? It's
A
Puharich's.
Journal of the Mystery of Uri Geller.
Yeah, so that, which is a really fascinating book that, super influential. Of course, those two, Puharich and Uri Geller, eventually parted ways, but for a while they were kind of like this very powerful duo in the world of parapsychology. So that's in here too. And so it goes anywhere from like this pretty thorough, interesting history of UFO cases with some really cool like MUFON cases that he mentions. Some I'd never heard of, some like really great like Bigfoot adjacent stuff. And
Oh
then it
yeah,
ends up
yeah, yeah. The Stan
in
mentions
this,
the Stan Gordon stuff in there. Yeah, of Pennsylvania.
yes, with those crazy long-armed creatures. And then by the middle, it's this very long sort of almost like a scrapbook of quotes from different contactee books. He's trying to kind of like put forward this idea, and you can really see him like building the philosophy of the raw material in this book. Not that it's definitely not channeled. I'm not here to like, whatever. I'm not interested in claiming one way or the other, but you can really see him like starting to think of how UFO contactees and the language that they are working with is so similar to stuff like the Owaspe Bible, this channeled Bible from around the turn of the century, and other sorts of like New Age channeling material, like post spiritualist stuff, where people are kind of, I don't like we were talking about in the Pulp Magic series a while ago. It's all so similar to the sort, the Mahatma letters and the channeled material from the Theosophists and that sort of person. So it's really kind of a weird book to. I've had it for a while, just as sort of like a curiosity,
Yeah,
because I had never really been that interested in the raw material, but I was interested in the fact that he was like a ufologist beforehand. So I had this book, and it's kind of funny how much it ties into the kind of stuff that we've been talking about lately. And then you mentioned wanting to look into the raw material and that sort of thing, and I thought, yeah, yeah, take a look, and lo and behold, it's really pretty interesting
yeah,
where he
yeah,
goes
yeah.
with it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I was just looking through when I realized we weren't going to be able to watch that documentary. I was looking through my Audible wish list, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh damn, I forgot Don Elkins wrote a UFO book." Um, and it is actually a really good UFO book. It's from what 1968.
77, it says.
Oh, it's that late.
First printing 77, yeah.
Okay, because they actually wrote like he was doing his work with Carla Rueckert, who was one of his students, who he used as a channel.
Yeah.
Um, he was doing work with her all the way back since I think '67, and they wrote a book called "The Crucifixion of
Right.
Esmeralda." What's the
Sweetwater.
Esmeralda Sweetwater, which is supposed to be like a prophetic metafiction, where like they basically Puharich is represented by a character prophetically in the book, and
Right.
the tragic end of Don Elkins is, or one of the members of their nucleus is prophesized in the book. I think this is
Yeah.
something that we're going to look deeper into in a later episode talking about this stuff. But yeah, in terms of the UFO book, I was actually really impressed by how synergistic it was. I liked that it was not really discriminating between a lot of the contactee stuff. Like it was citing George Hunt Williamson. It was citing Adamski and Howard Menger. It was citing, T. Lobsang Rampa. And, a lot of those names people associate with being bullshit. If you listen to our Pulp Magic episode on T. Lobsang Rampa, I think we kind of like looked into that a little bit. But I think
Yeah.
there's also something interesting about collating the information from those supposed channeled sources and kind of seeing if there's any, why there might be similarities and how they're similar
Yeah.
in, the hoax and the mysticism, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar. And, there's any number of reasons why that might be. But yeah, so yeah, I guess this comes later after he's already working with Carla. I'm not sure if they've started the raw channeling yet. My chronology on that's not great. But so this is kind of like a summing up his research of 20 something years into UFOs. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if we want to get into like where they ended up yet,
They
but
they started L&L in 1970, which is early, and then
yeah,
and they were influenced by a contactee group out of Detroit led by Walt Rogers.
right.
I've never heard of Walt Rogers, have you?
No, but I remember reading about that influence.
So
Yeah, no, I
that's
was not
that's pretty
familiar with
cool.
Walt
I'd like
Rogers.
to check that out as well. But I guess the raw stuff doesn't start until the 1980s. So that's
Right, yeah,
interesting
that's
as
what I
well.
figured. Yeah, I mean, because that's when so they're trying to like channel stuff through Carla, and I guess they're not really getting what they want. They do meet Puharich, and then soon after they meet Jim McCarty, or maybe they had already met him. So this all kind of happens, and then having that third person is what gets the raw material proper started, and the sort of interpersonal situation happening with them is also really fascinating because, and I also wouldn't want to say anything like super untoward because Jim's still around, and these are people that lived, but so they were kind of having this really interesting intimate situation where Don was basically celibate or
Yeah, I
at
don't know if
least
this is like
asexual.
confirmed. This comes from like a Reddit post,
No,
but is this like?
because no, it does come because I was listening to an interview with Jim McCarty and he's
Oh,
basically
okay,
talking about it.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and he was saying like him and Don and Carla were kind of like this for a long time, deeply romantically intertwined, but that he was just not like interested in that, and she was, and so it became like this odd thing where so then Jim was the scribe. He would be typing out the information as Carl was speaking it. But then, behind the scenes, they were like a couple, and then Don was just hanging out. Um,
And
and he,
they were
yeah,
using like elements of sex magic too. That was
they were doing sex
yeah,
magic. There's a lot of occult stuff in here, actually. Like, it's kind of a weird middle ground between ufology and channeled stuff, and then like very explicit, like white sexual magic type stuff. Like, they all knew their stuff. It's mentioned a few times in several places, like having some of the grimoires around and like actually like like really trying to do it in a way that is in line with the Western occult tradition,
is it?
which is crazy.
Isn't that a weird thing too? Like I believe that there's some like couple swapping stuff in the nine channelings, like the
Mm,
I if I recall correctly, I believe that that's in there, and that's like a weird element, right? Because if you think all the way back to like Edward Kelly and John Dee, the entities they were channeling were like, well, you guys should have sex with each other's wives.
right. You mean it's all wife swapping? That's that's really, yeah, it
It's
is
pretty.
weird. Well,
It's certainly strange.
I mean I guess I don't know. If I were looking at it generously, it's like a sort of taboo breaking thing that isn't necessarily a traumatic one. Um,
Yeah,
and on the other
yeah.
hand, maybe it's just like fellas, looking to have a good time.
True.
I just don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, so Don also, and
these guys doing some crazy
he's
stuff.
talked about it. Don Elkins talked about it. I think even in an interview, he was like, I guess, abused as a child, and so had this kind of like, and that opens a can of worms around the
Traumatogenic
trauma
narrative.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, and he's like talks about it in a way that where it makes it seem like it has something to do with all of this. Like it keeps coming up in the literature in several places that I've seen. Um,
That's like some
it has to,
conjure some like monarch kind of thing there.
yeah, or something like that. I mean, I don't know. And then, yeah, so it's all kind of really, really strange little nook in the UFO and New Age thing. And what's even stranger is it's like really intense staying power. Like I remember a few years ago, everyone was talking about the raw material. It was like very hot for a minute. Like
Yeah.
um, I would see used copies of it all over the place. They had it in stock at like Barnes and Noble and shit like that. Like it was just all over the place. And I don't really know why. Like I'm sure we could trace the like pop cultural revival of it, or maybe it never went away.
I think it
But
like a lot of the channeling light language stuff got popularized on TikTok and whatnot, and West Coast
mm,
kind of psychedelic society. And I think that
yeah,
the L&L thing was kind of a grounded set of information for that type of, I don't know, person to look into. But it's kind of funny though, because I'm here thinking to myself like, because the crazy thing about the nine, the Uri, even the Uri Puharich thing, and the Law of One thing as well, is that they're all kind of these quests. Like it's this insane questing thing where it's like we have to stop the annihilation of mankind. Like we have to disseminate this information from these channeled sources, and we've got to raise humanity's vibrations to a higher realm. And it all kind of like falls apart. And Uri Geller is now, telling Donald Trump that he has to bomb Iran. And like
ugh,
what
yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, what happened to the nine? Where did they go? Where did it go? And then isn't it strange that like just this week there's that insane radar penetrating image that shows massive structures underneath the one of the pyramids in Egypt?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look into it enough to know whether or not it's like serious work being done or what, but it's insane. And I was actually this whole thing got me to finally pick up the Stargate Conspiracy by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, which is something I've like looked at the really excellent notes at the back before, trying to find cool books to look into because I always kind of thought of it as just like an overview of, I guess, like that weird Egyptomania slash ancient aliens nexus that happened in like the 90s and early 2000s where
Mm-hmm.
everyone's writing like UFO alien pyramid books like and it kind of came out of the Serious Mystery by Temple as well.
True.
Um, a lot of stuff based on that Schwaller de Lubitsch, that sort of Egypt as like this grand galactic esoteric puzzle to unlock. So this is kind of like their critique of that. So that's kind of what I thought it was. But I remembered seeing in the notes there's references to the Nine and like all of this stuff. And like this was one of the early books released in 98, I think, that really kind of like broke the Nine as like this weird conspiratorially important thing. Like not told from the perspective of someone who participated, but looking at it critically.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this two very, very solid chapters talking about the weird CIA and like uh, big money connections to the Nine. And so, Don and Carla get a mention in here as kind of like an offshoot of the Nine,
Yeah.
which I guess is true. And I mean, yeah, I'm really enjoying reading this book. There's a great chapter talking about the Mars mission and the face on Mars and like the way that Mars has become associated in our minds with Egypt, mostly through people like Richard Hoagland and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it lives up to the hype that it has gotten for a long time. Uh,
In the new Lavenda, I'm just going to call it the new Peter Lavenda book because I don't think Tom DeLonge's really picking up the pen on this one. But
who knows?
yeah, Lavenda connects because he's the one who also kind of popularized the nine in Sinister Forces,
Right.
and he expands upon the nine. Which, if you're not familiar, it's a Puharich had the Round Table Foundation, which
Yeah.
was a center for parapsychical research. He had his hands in a lot of different things. He was an inventor. He was getting government contracts. He was certainly developing technologies of mind control and
The
things that
tooth
would
radio is a big one.
the tooth radio. I mean, but it's also like weird because they were patents for hearing devices.
Right.
I'm not
There's
saying that
always like a
like
yeah.
there's he had his hands in a lot of different things, and we can certainly expound upon that. Like, I think that he is somebody that would have taken money from anywhere to try and do what he wanted, and probably would have at least cracked some eggs to make the omelets that he wanted as well. Um,
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I listened to a pretty good interview with a woman who worked with him. Did you listen to that the interview with Jeffrey
I did.
Mishlove?
Yeah, I did. I did.
And she was like pretty like even though she went through like a horrible ordeal of the CIA basically torching their house and she almost died.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
No, like but and she still was like I don't think he was like a bad guy. I think he was extremely what's the word? Um had ambitions. He was an ambitious guy and he
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm saying is that I think that
but
he would have
yeah,
like if it was framed to him that this was going like some great technology that he was creating was going to be used as a weapon, he would have still done it in order to try and create it. Um,
maybe, yeah.
and anyway, so this channeling group happens in the early 1950s. There's this Indian doctor Vinod who his whole
Yeah.
character is really interesting because he's just a medical doctor from India who comes to the
He's a
States and
channel.
becomes a channeler, which is a
Yeah.
whole weird pulp magic thing in itself. That is kind of fits right into that 1950s thing. Um,
Yeah.
but the everybody that's there is like a blue blood American family. There's an Astor. There's CIA connections. Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, is there. Um, and they channel this group of nine deities who um, are extraterrestrial, but are also related to the Egyptian gods. And there's
What's
this,
that called? The Ennead? Is that what that's called? The nine Egyptian gods?
believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's this whole quest to stop nuclear annihilation, and they really do like this insane, like they're led almost across the world to stop this. And I hope to actually revisit this material as it's chronicled in Stuart Holroyd's book. And
Yeah.
Stuart Holroyd is related to Star Trek, right?
I forget. He's had a few different weird he's popped up in weird places. I don't remember where, but I remember being like Stuart Holroyd.
Yeah, I think he has something to do with Star Trek. I mean, Gene Roddenberry is also connected to the Nine thing,
Yeah.
and in the new Lavenda book, Lavenda connects Lee Harvey Oswald to the Nine through the Astor girl and
Huh.
Arthur Young, who apparently they had befriended Lee Harvey Oswald's wife. I mean,
Right.
people would assume that a lot of this is like, and certainly the FBI assumed this, that a lot of the contactee stuff was communist infiltration. That's why George Van Tassel had a massive FBI file, and I'm sure they were tailing Adamski. And, we know from history that it was a point of the Bolsheviks to try and infiltrate theosophical lodges, as I'm sure it was our intelligence as well. And
Yeah. But why they all end up being like fascists in the end, though? It is another interesting thing. Like, not all of them, but more were fascists than were communists for sure. Like, I mean, like, fascists, not like guys I don't like. Like, Hunt Williamson, Adamski had some weird shit like that. like a lot of Nazi connections or sort of like
Yeah, but that's just though.
post-Nazi.
That's just Hunt Williamson and George Dudley Pelley and Adamski. Adamski was like, I think people there was some stuff there, but I'm not really too sure. Hunt Williamson and
Right.
George,
Well,
or I'm sorry, William Dudley Pelley, obviously, but
yeah. Who is,
Van
I don't even
Tassel
remember
was
who the rest of
Van
them are.
Tassel was they accused him of being a communist. I mean,
Right. Van
he had
Tassel
a
is
squeaky
definitely, yeah.
clean record otherwise, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. He was a more, what do you call it? Egalitarian type of guy.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, sure.
And how
Uh,
even Howard Menger, there's nothing to that guy, like, but his stuff,
hey,
I'm sure he probably was on watch, on communist watch as well, just because
yeah, that's
the
interesting.
language of that contact,
Yeah,
you
that's
get
weird.
you get messages over there, bro.
My printer just turned on.
That'd be cool if you got printed a message.
It's like, don't talk bad about George Adamski.
Yeah,
George Adamski was a patriot.
it's a picture of
That would be a good message.
a lamp saucer.
I'd like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but we got to talk about the freaking movie.
Oh yeah, the movie is sick.
I watched it the other night.
Do you
Um,
remember the title off the top of your head?
it
The
is. I'm looking at
Hidan
it's
of
the Hidan of
Mershabamba?
Mok Biangjao, which was written
Makbianjiao.
Mok Biangjao. Don Elkins and Carla Rueckert wrote it, and it's stars Carla. Basically, she has a pretty important role in it. It's perhaps the most exploitation-y exploitation film I've seen in a long time. It's like really, really dirty. Like not just like it's just like it makes me feel grimy. Like the actors are so bad, and there's so much gratuitous nudity and like bad jokes about sex. It's just like a really bizarre movie. And then but the plot of it is like this. It's just odd that they'd have made it, and also that they claim that it was dictated to them through channeling. Like that they not dictated like literally, but that they had to make a movie about this. It was told to them through this like channeled session. And this is the movie.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
it's
great.
yeah, I think that's kind of what like the interesting part about like dissecting all this is it really just leads you to the point that the 70s, like, you can't really put a bow on it that easily and be like, well, it's all,
No,
this mad doctor MK ultraing everybody and like creating this
right.
new world religion. Like, I don't think it's that simple at all. Like, I think it's many stories that are more endemic of how strange and, I don't know, disparately connected things were, but like, it's like
Yeah.
things were connecting in new way, in globalizing in new ways, but also like these old energetic forces that were disconnected were just kind of running rampant. And just how weird like these little cliques got, like you have to assume that these people
So
were
weird.
fucking with psychedelics because,
You would think.
spoiler alert, Don Elkins killed himself.
Yeah. In a
In
pretty crazy way.
Yeah. I mean, I he eventually got, pretty paranoid and seemingly had a nervous breakdown. I guess he was in mental hospital for like 6 months and was released and then got bad again. And, he was, Carla Rueckert and Jim had to get court ordered. I don't really know what that's called when you get a court ordered like
Yeah. Like
asylums.
a or what's it called? Like, yeah, well, they can do it against your will, whatever, where they take you away
Yeah, the English
for
call
your
it
own
getting
good.
sectioned,
Right.
but I don't know
Um,
what it's called in the
and
States.
he didn't want to do it, so he killed himself with a gun. And
Yeah, there was something like 39 armed police officers having a stand down with him. It seemed like a really insane situation in Louisville, Kentucky, and quite sad.
yeah,
But
Really
I,
sad. It made me feel sad.
yeah, for sure. But I guess that in his paranoia, he was, afraid that the FBI was following him for selling drugs. So
Yeah.
you'd have to wonder if there was some heavy experimentation going on with psychedelics as well. I don't know. I mean, you could see if you could uncover that in there. It would certainly be reasonable to assume at that time, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to say like what involvement they had with anything like that, but it does make you think that maybe there was some kind of because he was paranoid about the FBI, he was paranoid about the CIA. He was just getting like real paranoid, and who knows if it was all delusion or not, or like what, where why he ended up that way. It's not uncommon. It feels almost like a pre-echo of what happened to Bill Cooper,
Bill Cooper, yeah. Yeah, I
except he
mean,
didn't do it himself.
I think that's kind of there's something about this sort of the totality of this kind of questing when you like
Yeah.
superimpose this situation on your reality. Um, I think it's easy to get spun out. And you see it time and time again, like reading through different accounts of things like this that, often end up tragic or uh, on the wrong end of mental health. But
Yeah. It's crazy. So I mean, like the basic mechanism in this movie is that they're kidnapping girls. They're trying to figure out who's kidnapping these girls, and it's tied to this drug ring.
yeah,
And then
uh-huh.
it turns out that they're like at some kind of compound where they're killing the girls and then putting alien consciousness into their bodies as like these kinds of like puppets.
Isn't that
It's like and it's not
kind of
that
a
clear in
crazy
the movie.
plot?
It's a crazy
What a
plot.
crazy plot for this guy to make. I mean, you
And
got to say,
yeah,
not great optics for,
no.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and Carla is the one who's like being emptied of her soul and then filled with like a malevolent alien.
Right.
And then this is before they did the raw material, where
Yeah.
she was the channel, and she's like topless in half the movie. It's all just like it has a very dirty feeling. And there's these
Yeah.
bizarre country songs throughout.
Oh, yeah.
Like
The country songs are rough. I mean, like
I
they
can't
just,
figure out
I don't mean that
why
they're bad. They just give you there's a lot of
come
like,
from.
I don't know.
Like I want that record. They're so
Yeah.
bad and weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a guy being like, and then they're fucking in the truck.
Uh
And like,
huh.
are you allowed to curse back then?
Yeah. There's a trailer for the movie's on Tubi under the title,
Yeah.
Invasion of the
Invasion of the Girl
Girl
Smashers.
Snatchers. Again, not great optics.
No.
If you don't want people to think that you were having a drug infused mind control cult in the future, you probably shouldn't make a movie about it in the past. But
Right. Yeah, and
um,
call it the Girl Snatchers.
it's cool regardless. If this story didn't end
It
so
is.
tragically, it would probably be a lot cooler of a
And
film.
yeah, I mean, Carla was still around till maybe 8 or so years ago. Like
And seemingly
she
very involved with L&L, Love and Light.
she was pretty much the leader of it for quite a while, and I guess Jim is still involved, and they have. It's weird. If my like friend who I started like, if you know, went out in the back and shot yourself in the head because cops were following you, I'd probably end consensus on reality.
Yeah.
But
Like, well, that shit, that was weird. Keep that
and
going.
not, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, well, we have to make it bigger. We have to have it in every Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Um,
So, but then again, who knows how people deal with, somebody's death? I feel like having sympathy for that is probably better than thinking it's some kind of like nefarious. I just don't know because it's weird.
yeah, I think there's elements of all of it in there, and I think
Yeah.
it's probably a very complicated story, and I wonder how much we'll be able to actually trace And what I'll say about L and L, just from looking at their stuff a little bit, I don't really know. I'm just learning about this group, and that there was a continuation of the Law of One Ra stuff recently.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool that they actually make their archive readily accessible. The Esmeralda Sweetwater book is available in PDF. I think a lot of the other stuff is available in PDF on their website. There's a whole archive of the channeling sessions and the interviews. And I
Yeah.
saw an email response that they had to the main video that alleges the Puharich connection in like a 7-minute YouTube,
Yeah.
and their response to it was pretty open. I mean, they kind of just like talked about what they knew about that connection, and how Elkins had been working on stuff previously. And he also mentions this in the UFO book as well, like in the Uri chapter, that he was working on these channeling groups, that he, like when he learned about the Uri Geller Puharich stuff, he was so impressed because how it related to what he was already up to.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know if there, could be something crazy about them, but I don't really know. It seems pretty benign, and their archive is cool, at least
Yeah,
on the
I just don't
surface.
know. Right. I mean, yeah, like, because as much as I want to be like, I wanted my bit for this whole thing to be that Puharich is actually a great guy and it doesn't, like, none of this is true. There's just some dark, like, some of the stuff he was looking into, like, I mean, any of that, like, mid-century mind control stuff, which I guess could be the name of a series, mid-century mind control. All of that stuff is like pretty grisly. Like they were not treating the human soul with much respect. And so to
Yeah.
be involved with that to any extent, I feel is pretty damning. So you kind of just, was he like, and then, the big thing that people critique about him is like the space kids. Like Puharich would have
Uh-huh.
these like teens and young people and people in their
The old
20s too,
Faraday
like
cage, sir.
in the Faraday cage, like doing ESP tests. And like people think that that's like this, like they say that like with, like a scary sound behind it. But I feel like any of the really terrible stuff he was doing is probably not the stuff that, I don't know, like where you can actually talk to those people because they're still around. Like, and if they say like, no, he wasn't like doing, trafficking to us. We were actually testing ESP. So I don't know. Like, I feel like there's this tendency to want to sensationalize anything that's like, by today's standards, like iffy. But I feel like the real darkness might lay in the less exciting terrain when it comes to this kind of person. Like, what was he doing at, like the Edgewood facility, like
Yeah.
testing like chemical weapons and shit
Right.
like that.
Exactly. For sure. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's some grisly stuff in there.
yeah,
Where was it in Chaos that they talk about that like Jacob's Ladder handshake drug that it's like was being developed that would
yeah,
just put you in like a 40-day terror
right.
spell.
I mean, it's crazy. Like the kind of stuff they do that like with drugs and with viruses and like any of that like biological,
Biologics.
yeah, it's just like fucking scary because they can do stuff where it's like, I don't know, they could release a virus that stops the world and
Yeah.
we wouldn't even know until 4 years later.
I want somebody to lay out how they think that Puharich was manipulating this whole situation. Like if it's
Right.
hypnosis and suggestion, then sure, I appreciate you making a case for that. But I've also heard like the other stuff where it's like he went to the dentist 3 days before, and that's when they put the radio in, and
Yeah.
like if that's true, that's like some Dr. Robotnik shit.
I just don't like, I think that that technology, I just don't know. Like, would you really think that the voices were actually coming. Like, I've had like weird auditory stuff where it's like I can't figure out where a noise is coming from, and then I get freaked out because I think it's coming from in my head, and I'm like, oh no, it's actually like something else. Okay, fine, and
Hmm.
then I'm fine. But like if I had to live with like not knowing if it was in my head or not because it was in my tooth, like I would lose my fucking mind. I wouldn't think I was channeling something. I
Yeah,
would like,
and I don't
or like
like.
I don't know. Yeah,
There's he was advocating against uh extremely low frequency stuff because Russia was
right.
blasting the Western Hemisphere with the woodpecker
Yeah,
frequency, which was like making people sick and shit. And
yeah.
they were saying that it was for sonar and sending
Mm,
radio waves to naval ships, but people like Puharich alleged that it was for other reasons.
yeah.
Um, but I don't know if they're like. You think he was really able to like blast radio waves at people's skulls and vibe? Like, do you think that we had that capability? And if so, where is that now? Like,
We still have it now. I mean,
yeah,
I think that that was real. I think it still is real.
hitting him with Havana.
Yeah, I think that's all real for the most part. Like, I think that technology exists, like voice to skull or whatever, like
Yeah.
vibrating your brain and like make it. But I don't think that that technology is the same as patenting a radio receiver that you can put inside of a tooth for like a hearing aid workaround. Like,
Yeah.
and I just don't think that, you know. I don't think people are necessarily that easy to fool. I think that those weapons are probably more like brute force type applications. I mean, I could be totally wrong. Like, I just feel like I don't like,
It's been a minute since we
I don't know.
looked into Puharich, but I feel like when we dig back in, it's gonna reveal that it was more like psychedelics and suggestibility.
Right. And even that, like, I feel like that's too chaotic, even. Like, I don't think that you can really, and again, maybe I'm being naive, but like, if you give somebody enough psychedelics, like, do you really think you can like have or do you just like give them, do you give them
Charlie got a
psychedelics
lot
and,
done, either like depending on
right.
whatever you know
I know, but like,
motive you go with in
did
that
he though?
story.
Like, was he actually like yeah, it depends what the motive is for sure. Is chaos like literally the motive, or like the destabilization of the student movement or whatever? Like, is that the
Or I mean,
motive
even
or
just getting this
fear?
group of kids to commit these gruesome murders, you know.
Right, but like, is random murders the motive? Like, I just don't know. Like, can you like give someone enough drugs and then tell them to do like, yeah, maybe. Did he know he was going to end up with the raw material though? Like, was that like, did he have that like written out? And he's like, I need somebody else to do this, and I need it to happen. But everyone's gonna know that I knew them, and I was kind of behind it, but nobody's gonna be able to prove it.
I think
It
that
just doesn't really track.
you could more skeptically make the case that Carla Rueckert being an English major, Don Elkins being very interested in UFOs and contactee, and clearly also theosophical spiritualism and
Yeah,
it just esoteric thought. You can certainly make the case that they had preordained their like after researching this culmination of contactee material that they would want to create their own, not through
sure.
actually channeling it, but just generating it, you know, and generating the scenario, and then maybe kind of
Yeah,
like in a metafictional way, going with that and working through some pseudo channeled meditation stuff. I mean, what's really the difference between that and what Kenneth Grant's New Isis Lodge was doing, right? Like from what
sure.
we understand, the way that their rituals were, they were working with a sort of script and uh, you know doing visionary work with a preordained script. It's not really that different than that.
Yeah, right. I just don't know, but it's all uh like the fruit of the whole thing in the raw books, the Law of One books. I have not read them. From what I can tell, well, I mean, I just don't really understand it. Like how it stacks up against other channeled material. It seems sort of, I don't know. I mean, it has this big following, so there must be something there. I don't want to talk shit about about something other people really love
I
or
think
whatever,
like
but
the architecture of the way that it builds out uh, a cosmology is interesting, and I think that's the appealing
it is
part.
interesting.
It reminds
Yeah.
me a bit of the Kabbalion by William Walker Atkinson. Um,
Yeah.
I think
You
that
probably read that, Elkins.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
got sort of like a Neoplatonism in it a little bit, and
I mean, again, it's Carla's saying all this stuff, so you have to wonder who's if we're gonna go with a hyper skeptical route and think like they just made up a religion for fun because they thought it was time to do that. Really, it would be Carla who's giving all the answers. I mean, Don can ask. Don was the questioner, Carla was the channel, and then
the
Jim
questions
was the
get
scribe.
pretty lengthy, though.
Right. So is he kind of like asking questions in order to kind of program a response out of Carla, or is Carla making it up? Like, is Carla like you wonder if they're faking it? Who's like, is it a feedback kind of dialogue between these two, or is Carla leading it? Is Don leading it? Is Jim like altering what's being said? Because I think there would be recordings.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have the actual channeling sessions
Right.
recorded, the audio recordings, and even if you listen to those, if she's spot rapping it, then that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could do it. It kind of reminds me of like, I mean, obviously it reminds me of like channeled, like, what did they call it back then? Mediumistic speech, where you're kind of just like speaking for a spirit. I mean, it's very much just like that, except, yeah, what is the difference between like a mediumistic trance where you're speaking for a spirit and channeling? It's really not really any different at all.
If you listen to her, like during the sessions, though, if she was spot channeling, you would think that there would be some gibberish in there.
Yeah, sure.
Like it's
Like if
pretty.
you're just like,
The,
yeah,
the ideas are coming pretty clean, and
sure.
like it gives the sense that somebody's feeling out an idea, but it also gives the sense that maybe there was like a starting point.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, I believe that there's weird stuff in this world, so maybe
Yeah.
there's
No, it
something
could be
truly
real.
weird to it too. I really don't, I'm not sure, but I'm also trying
I
to.
like kind of assume there is,
Yeah, you think there's something
but
weird to it?
yeah, I think that it's probably legit to some extent. Like, I think all of these things are. We might not understand like the mechanics of it, but
I think that's
I
kind
don't
of
think
the
it's yeah,
that's like the terrifying thing about shit like this. Even like when you think about the vertical plane, the
yeah,
Dodelston messages, like these things happen where it's like this wellspring of contact and all of this synchronistic, anomalistic stuff going on, and then it just ends, and it's like, what the fuck? Like it leads up to this point where it's like we're preparing for the mass landing, or we have to stop the
right.
annihilation of Earth, or and then it just ends and nothing happens.
It's all computer.
All computer, baby. So yeah, I'm excited to dig more into this stuff. I think the
Yeah,
crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater is going to be interesting. The title of it reminds me of the transmigration of Timothy Archer, and Don
for
Elkins'
sure.
life kind of reminds me a little bit of that. One of my
Yeah,
favorite Philip K. Dick books as well.
yeah, that's creepy.
It's got a little bit
Well,
of
I
a
feel like that happened a lot.
Bishop Pike
Huh?
had a tragic story like this as well, like
Right.
where he had mediumistic contact happening, and it kind of disappeared, and then he died in that tragic way.
Yeah, they all seem to die in pretty tragic ways. That's not true, but a lot of them do.
Uri Geller's like the only one still standing out of this whole mess.
I feel like he was like, I have to turn this into a brand and I'm going to not be serious about it anymore.
Yeah,
And now he's like a millionaire. Is he? Is he rich?
I don't know. Maybe he won that lawsuit against Pokemon.
I saw he like tweeted about it once where he was like, I feel so bad about attacking Pokemon when all they really were trying to do is to spread the joy of Uri Geller.
Nice.
Because he was like suing them because they were holding spoons.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, I'm not giving the money back, though.
That's great.
All right.
You know what? Let him sue.
There you go.
He's Uri fucking Geller.
All right. Let's let's close it out on patreon.com/consensus unreality. Thank you for listening to the free portion of this episode. If you like what you heard, we're going to continue this series. Check back in, but it might be on patreon.com/consensus unreality, so you might have to subscribe. It's the best way to support the show. $5 a month. That is the cost of a cup of coffee. So consider supporting us and the weird shit that we do. I think we explore some stuff that other people don't go into. Although this is kind of the one of the ones that people do go into. But we're going to go into it in a different way.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Patreon. Here we are. What else has been going on besides this bullschnocky?
Yeah, that's been fun though.
It is cool
well, we
how it just
finished.
kind of came up. And I forgot how weird this
Yeah.
shit is. Like, this story is so bizarre.
It's weird. It's wild and weird.
What's that New Water song? Bizarre Love Charm?
That's what it is. We finished the Journal of Shells.
Oh, yeah. Fuck yeah. Journal of Shells, bro.
I'll have the printed copies soon, then we'll be mailing them out. What else is going on?
The journal looks fucking sick. We
It's
got
nice.
the pictures of the print. You've got them in hand now?
I have the proof.
He's got the proof. So they'll be getting
And then
mailed
I
out
told him to go for it.
any day now.
Any day now.
And the bonus